Did you know that your Facebook pages in Canada, with your comments about the Canadian election, were being deleted based on a handbook that Facebook operated with a censorship contractor? Well, it was a very interesting conversation. And last time we spoke with Ryan Hartwig, who worked as a contractor, we asked him if we could see this handbook. And today he's going to show us what it looks like. Joining us now via Skype from Phoenix, Arizona, is Ryan Hartwig. Ryan, welcome back. You were such an interesting guest. Did I accurately summarize the role of Cognizant and your role with that company as a contractor censor for Facebook?
Yes, that's accurate. Yeah. Cognizant had this 3-year, $200 million contract with Facebook for content moderation beginning in 2017. And yeah, I started there in March of 2018, and I was there for just under 2 years. Cognizant ended the contract early in February of this year. But yeah, I did that on a daily basis for 2 years, reviewed content and deleted a lot of it too.
That's incredible. Yeah. So if I recall our conversation last time, there were handbooks for things that would come up frequently, things to watch for. I take it that you're an American citizen. You're not a Canadian expert or anything like that, but this handbook was your guide to the election. Is that accurate to say you're just a regular American who was working in Phoenix?
Yeah, that's accurate. We did primarily North American content, but we also did, Canadian elections to a certain extent. So that training deck that I shared, yeah, it has pages concerning different candidates and how to treat hate speech in Canada. But yeah, North America included, obviously Canada. And so we did that. We did monitor those elections.
That's incredible. Well, let's go to it. I mean, you were kind enough to get access to this handbook, and you've sent some images to us. I'd like to walk through it. So this is a snapshot of your screen. It says table of contents, and maybe we can zoom in a little bit here. This is the table of contents that is the rule book by which you and the 1,500 censors would operate. Is that right?
That's correct. I mean, in addition to the existing policies that we have, like the hate speech policy, this gives additional guidance on how to monitor and action things related to the election. Yeah.
All right, well, let's start going through them. Here's a close-up of it. Election overview, voting information, prominent candidates, expected violations. What's an expected violation? You can see country name Canada, voting dates, October 21. What kind of expected violations were they looking for?
Yeah, expected violation, that's kind of a funny phrase to think about. It reminds me of the movie Minority Report, where people are punished for crimes before they're committed. Expected violations, that would almost always, when they talk about expected violations, whether they're talking about Trump's State of the Union speech, where we're expected to see hate speech violations, or in this example, these are expected violations, hate speech, fake accounts impersonation. So there's some things that are legitimate. Voter fraud, for example. Some people would say on social media, Democrats vote on the following Tuesday, or give wrong information about the voting dates. So that's legitimate. But yeah, hate speech seems to always be, it always seems to be attacking people on the left and coming from people on the right. So it just kind of goes along with that whole media slant that all right-wingers are racists. It seems to reinforce that.
Disinformation about where and when to vote. I happen to agree that should be mopped up. That's probably good practice. Impersonations should probably be mopped up, good practice. But I remember when we talked to you earlier this summer, you pointed out an example of hate speech. You said that if a conservative were to call a left-winger a feminazi, which is sort of a harsh word for an overbearing feminist, that's hate speech. But if a leftist calls a conservative a plain old Nazi, that's acceptable. To me, that's the perfect example of the double standard. You can call a right-winger a Nazi, which, by the way, as a Jew, I find that trivializes the word Nazi. If you call everyone you don't like a Nazi, it starts to lose meaning. But you're not allowed to call a feminist a feminazi, because that's off the table. That's an example from your handbook, am I right?
Yeah, that's a perfect example. And another example I didn't mention was similar to that. For example, if I call you on Facebook, if I say Ezra is a Trump humper, and you report it directly, that stays up. But if I call you a snowflake, that gets taken down.
The word snowflake gets
taken down, but Trump humper stays up. Yeah.
Now, I've never heard the word Trump humper before. Frankly, it sounds a little funny. It sounds like the kind of thing a child would say. It doesn't hurt my feelings. Someone calls me a Trump humper, I'd sort of say, grow up. But the word snowflake is even less hurtful to I mean, snowflake, it's not even a mean word. And you're telling me that Facebook's rule is you're a conservative who calls a liberal a snowflake, that will be deleted. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. So once again, the double standard. Yeah.
All right. Well, those are generic issues: feminazi, snowflake, Trump humper. I'm sorry, I can't help but saying that and chuckle. But let's get serious for a second, because here in Canada, our government says, "Oh, we've got to be on alert for election hacking by foreign enterprises in, Russia or China or whatever." But actually, what you're here to say is that you and 1,500 of your colleagues in Phoenix were overtly, explicitly, and without hiding, you were censoring things in the Canadian election that Facebook told you to. And you're a foreigner, and Facebook's a foreign company. Phoenix is a foreign city. You were doing it.
That's correct.
Thousands or hundreds of thousands of times.
Yeah, that is correct. And this the candidate that we saw on one of the pages of the training deck under expected violations was, there are some slides about hate speech towards Jagmeet Singh. So they were giving, they're basically explaining that Jagmeet Singh is protected under the hate speech policy because of his physical appearance, because he's wearing a head covering. So hate speech protects against attacks against someone's religion. So it's kind of this gray area, because if you're attacking him as a candidate, and you have a picture of him, technically any attack on him would be considered an attack against his religion, because he's always wearing that head covering. So his religion is basically one and the same with him as a person. So it's very easy to interpret an attack as a content moderator. It's easy to interpret an attack on him as a person as an attack on his religion.
Wow, that's a very interesting distinction. I mean, he does wear his turban. He is very proud of it. I happen to think he's very fashionable. I actually enjoy seeing his turbans. He takes some fashion sense to it. Sort of cool, actually.
Yeah.
But I've got 100 criticisms of Jagmeet Singh that have nothing to do with his turban. What you're saying is, if I were to make one of these sharp criticisms of Jagmeet Singh, I think he's an empty suit. I think he's not well briefed. I think he plays footsie with violent extremists. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think he's a socialist. Those are all things I truly believe have nothing to do with his ethnicity. If I say those things, but it's associated with a picture of him, if there's a turban in the picture, which there always is because he always wears one, that by definition is hate speech, because a Facebook censor can say, it's linked to his picture of him in a turban. That's hate speech. Is that what you're saying? Did I understand you right?
Yeah, and we look at each job case by case. So if it's clear that it's just a political attack, we would interpret it as such. But there is a part of the hate speech policy that's visual hate speech. So if I have a cartoon character of someone with a turban, and I say that person's dumb, like with the caption "that person's dumb," and it's just a visual of a person with a turban, that gets deleted for hate speech, because that visual of the person wearing a head covering would signify that person's religion. So they do try to separate the nuances of attacking a candidate versus a religion. But here, what it's really doing is it's training us as content moderators to look out for things. I mean, it gets kind of old because we see hundreds of pieces of content a day. So they're letting us know, hey, be on the lookout for any attacks about Jagmeet Singh. So we may ignore other attacks, more nuanced attacks on other candidates, but because Facebook's highlighting this, it's going to have the impact of giving additional protections to Jagmeet Singh, because we're more aware of it. When we see thousands of pieces of content a day, Facebook wants us to make sure that we're deleting any attacks against Jagmeet Singh.
That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.